Welcome, my fellow modeling and tabletop gaming enthusiasts, to the Mediocre Modeler Show. We're going to have a little, slightly different episode format today because we're going to start with a little bit of a discussion and then we're going to move into a demonstration. And that, of course, is going to cover decals, waterslide decals, Deckals, waterslide transfers. We're going to be focusing specifically on waterslide decals, Deckals transfers, whatever you want to call them. And then we're going to go into a demonstration of how I do it. This has been covered ad nauseum across all of the different modeling forums, YouTube, everywhere. Everyone kind of has their own process, but if you're new to it, there's a couple of tips and tricks that we can go over that will definitely make things a little bit easier for you. And there's a few products that can definitely help make things easier. So kind of to start things out, they can be a little bit daunting. If you're not experienced with them. Decals are something that I've been working with for 15 years. And once you kind of figure out some of the tricks, it makes it a lot easier. You find some of these products to use, it's going to make things a lot easier. So first things first, not all decals are created equal. That's not to say that decals from maybe some of the examples that we're going to look at are any less quality than others, because the actual decal printing process can be kind of complicated, especially if you're trying to get white. There's special printers that you have to use, but there are ways that you can print your own decals at home just using an inkjet printer and special decal paper, and you'll get one similar to those from a lot of smaller manufacturers, people that are making custom decals, compared to some of the larger companies like the scale model companies or Warlord Games or Games Workshop. Specifically, they've got more professional level decals. So I've got a number of examples here, and we'll take a little bit closer look. But we've got a decal sheet for a P40 Warhawk, and this is from a company that's no longer in business, hasn't been for quite some time, called Amtech Miniatures. More of a professional style decal. These might have actually been printed by Cartograph. They're just labeled Amtech. Again, another scale model kit. These actually come from the Rubicon kit from the Rubicon Jeeps that I bought. And then the decals we're actually using for the demonstration, these are some small sort of home printed decals from a company called Company B Models. They did the M16 MGMC I reviewed a while back. And then, of course, honestly, probably some of the best decals I've ever worked with. This is a Forge World sheet. So Games Workshop sheet from Forge World for the Ultramarines for Horus Heresy. Honestly, probably some of the best decals I have ever worked with. And we'll kind of take a look at what kind of sets those apart here in a little bit before we go into the demonstration. So keeping some of that in mind, there are some tips and tricks that I can go over that I use, that I have learned over the years, that could potentially help make things a little bit easier. So without any further ado, let's head on down to the bench and talk more decals. All right, so here we have our sample decals. First thing we're going to talk about, we're going to take one from like a production kit. So basically like an off-the-shelf kit. So again, this is from an out-of-production model kit for a P40 from Amtech Miniatures, which used to be actually based in a town right near me, but they have been out of business for a very long time. I'm not entirely sure how well this is going to show up on camera because we're going to be relying on the reflection of the lights. But with larger companies and with more professional level decal printing, this is how it's going to look. So I want to try and use, if you can kind of see here, this decal here, maybe we'll use this one right here. You can kind of see the way the light's reflecting off of it. But once it hits the backing paper, it doesn't reflect. And that is because the actual decal film is only on the printed image of the decal itself. It's not over the entire sheet. You might get some very old decal sheets that have this, that would have the decal film over the entire sheet, but a lot of more modern production doesn't have that. You do get that with decals you print yourself or decals that smaller companies are making, and this makes it easier you can just cut out a vague shape around it. You don't have to cut particularly close to the decal in order to minimize the amount of carrier film that's going to come with it. And of course we can see here also with the Forge World sheet, you can see how many of those just have the film on just the printed image. The original Forge World Ultramarine sheet did have the film over everything. And you can see some spots here, like if we look at these Roman 13s, you can see that the decal film is actually over that entire block. So as you individually cut out each decal, you have to cut relatively close. Again, you can see that with some of these that are grouped together, but a lot of these shoulder pad insignia up here at the top are all individually coated. And of course, you know, some of the larger decals down here are by themselves. And it's, again, same as this Amtech sheet and these Rubicon ones, even though they're in a plastic baggie right now, but they are printed in the same fashion. So we'll take a look at this infantry sheet from Company B models. And again, you can kind of see how it's got the decal film over the entire sheet, which again, it's a smaller company, so they don't have the money to invest in the larger production equipment, which is perfectly fine. Don't get me wrong. This is kind of where I said that not all decals are made the same. Whereas you've got these companies that are larger, that can afford to do this more specialized printing. These are the type that you're going to get that's printed off an inkjet printer onto some decal paper, covered with usually a gloss coat to help protect them. But it just takes a little bit of carefulness, I guess you could say. Maybe just a little bit of extra work to make sure that you're trimming close to the shape, but not actually cutting the decal itself. So, you know, we've got our 2nd Infantry Division insignia and then all of our rank insignia. It's all on one. So you got to kind of cut a little closely, which explains some of the unusual shapes down there. And these American flags were actually part of the same sheet. So there was like this, but I've used enough of them that I've trimmed it down. I really do like these decals. I think the quality is actually very good. So don't let that kind of thing scare you away, or think that just because that's the way that someone does it, it's a lesser quality. It could be exactly the same quality, but again, they just don't have the production capacity to do some of these higher end, as we'll call it, decal sheets. But then again, calling it higher end, you know, versus a small production company, you know, classifies them separately, obviously. But again, the quality is there. Definitely usable, just takes a little bit of work, just a little bit of knowledge, which we will go ahead and move into next. We are ready to go. So we're gonna have a little discussion here real quick about the tools that I use. These are not necessarily tools that everybody should use, but they're the tools that I like. So obviously I've got my figure, I've got my decals. One note about the figure, it has been covered with a gloss coat. In this particular case, it's the Army Coater or Army Painter gloss. Just this one right here. This was what I was able to get at one of the local game stores. But I have covered it in a coat of gloss, which is going to help protect the underlying paint, and it makes it easier for the decal to actually conform to some of these surfaces. So we're going to end up putting on a total of 4 decals, but they're all going to be on the shoulders and the sleeves. So a little bit of an odd shape to conform to, but that gloss coat's definitely going to help. I've got a knife with a sharp blade. Definitely want to have a sharp blade when you're working with decals. I've got my tweezers, of course. Good old Q-tip or cotton bud, whatever you want to call it. I've got a brush, you know, a wide flat brush. I use this only specifically for doing decals. Of course, I've got some water and 2 of the big heavy lifters for this process. I've got Microset and I've got Solvaset. You'll hear a lot of the 1-2 punch of Microset and Microsol. Well, Solvaset here is high octane Solvaset, or yeah, Solvaset is Solvaset. Solvaset is high octane decal solution. It's like the amped up version of Microsol. So these are kind of a 1-2 combination, and once my decal is ready, I'll start by putting some Microset on the surface. It's going to help break the surface tension, so if I need to kind of move it around a little bit, I'll be able to do that easier, and it's going to help start breaking down that carrier film. Now, once the decal is in place, you've worked out any air bubbles that may be there, is where the Solvaset comes in. This is what is really going to soften that decal and help allow it to conform to the surface. Microsol does the same thing, but again, this will do it much more better. But a big word of caution, you do need to be careful with Solvaset, because it will destroy decals if you're not careful. If you accidentally smudge a decal that is covered with Solvaset before it's fully cured, it's going to destroy that decal, and it will take out the paint that is underneath it. So you do need to be careful with this. This is the 2nd bottle that I've had in probably 15 years, and you can see just how much I have left. It will last you a very long time, but it, again, high octane. I love this stuff, to be completely honest. So these are two very big things when it comes to getting decals to really get that painted on effect, especially with your armor models. Huge benefit if trying to put decals on shoulder pads of Space Marines. I have done dozens and dozens of Space Marine shoulder pads using this stuff, and it makes the absolute world of difference. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I need to take one quick moment. Needed my reference figure to make sure I'm getting my insignia, my unit patch, and the American flag on the correct shoulder. So had to grab that just to make sure. So we've got our miniature here again with this gloss coat on. So we're going to start with our unit insignia. So the 2nd Infantry Division insignia. So what I'm going to do, again, sharp hobby blade, is I'm going to cut relatively close to the decal, but I want to be careful so I don't actually cut it. Because this is covered in the full, because the full sheet is covered with decal film, I don't want a bunch of excess. So I need to make sure I'm cutting relatively close to help eliminate that, because it's that excess decal film that will kind of lead to that silvering effect that you may see. Because if it doesn't lay down quite fully, that was a little close, but that's okay. We'll make it work. So I've got my decal cut, or cut out. I want to make sure. Yeah, that'll still look all right. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, and there are several methods to do this, because again, with water slide transfers, we need the water to activate, which will start to dissolve the carrier film and remove it from the backing paper. I used to just hold it in tweezers, dunk it, and wait till it was loose. I've used paper towels soaked in water on a paper plate or on a plate. So what I'm actually going to do is just kind of dunk it for a few seconds here, and I've got to keep this little Tupperware container on my workbench with water for various things. If I just need some clean water, a lot of it is decaling, and then if I'm working with like a milliput or something like that, I'll use that. So then once that's dunked, I'm going to set it in the lid here, which is going to have a little bit of a pool. Because you don't want to put this on a porous surface because it will suck all the water out. You want it to sit in the water for a little bit. So I'm going to get my micro set and Solvaset ready. The Solvaset does come with its own applicator brush, but there is certainly no reason you couldn't just use a regular brush. Might actually be better, to be quite honest. And then I just need to kind of let the decal sit. That is the other thing about home printed decals. Which, not to say that Company B Models is a home company. I mean, it's a small company, but they're essentially kind of the same thing as printing your own. They do tend to come off the backing paper a little quicker, so you don't have to wait so long. I know if you get very old decal sheets, like I've had some from aircraft kits that were 20 or 30 years old, those have deteriorated to the point where the decals will just crack apart as soon as they get wet. They also might take a very long time to come loose from the backing paper. And I've had some recent production Battlefront decal sheets for Flames of War that have had some difficulty. They just tend to take a while. So I'll just kind of check and see. Yep, we are good to go. Plenty of movement off the backing paper there. So I'm going to go ahead, just dunk that one more time to keep it wet, put it back on there. Then get my brush and just get a little bit of micro set on the brush. And I'm going to get that on the shoulder where I want to put this decal. So we'll get our decal. It is kind of the other hard part of having to cut so close, is you don't have a whole lot of room to move them around. So I'm just going to kind of move that off the backing paper a little bit, get a little bit better of a grip. It slid right back where it came from. It still keeps doing that. Okay. You can use your finger, you can use a hobby knife, toothpick, whatever. I'm just going to use my brush to kind of slide that on. Doesn't have to be perfect. That's why we use the micro set, is so that we can have a little bit of time to move it around. And then I'm just going to get a little bit more micro set on there to make sure that it's going to allow me to do what I need to do and get it positioned properly. So I'm just going to use the tip of my tweezers here to kind of work this where I want it to be. Just kind of the top of the shoulder. Sorry there. And just kind of check that orientation. I want it to be relatively up and down relative to the angle of the arm. Decals are almost like horseshoes and hand grenades, where sometime close enough is what's going to matter. So then I'm going to take my Q-tip and I'm just going to kind of dab it very lightly just to soak up any of that excess microset or water that might be on it. And then this is actually where I'm going to get the Solvaset on. I don't want it a lot because this will run. So just get a little bit on there. Just kind of get it on there, make sure the decal's covered, and then we should be good. So that is going to take a little while to cure, but we can move on to our other decals in the meantime. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to our American flag. No comments about the authenticity of exactly how I'm choosing to put the decals on. That is personal preference, although don't tell that to a dedicated scale modeler. They will not take too kindly to that, let me tell you. But as this is generally going to be for a sci-fi-esque game, I am taking some artistic liberties. All right, so we've got the decal cut, bottom of the frame there. Sorry about that. And again, same process. So we're gonna go through this process about 4 times. So I'm just gonna dunk that for a little bit and let that sit just for a little bit. And in the meantime, I'm actually going to start prepping for the next decals that I need to do, which are going to be the rank insignia down here. The unfortunate thing about this particular sheet is you only have one of each of the technician 5th, 4th, 3rd sergeant, staff sergeant, and technical sergeant. So this particular squad leader is going to technically be a technical sergeant, which is fine. So essentially the platoon sergeant is going to be leading a squad for whatever purpose. So again, this is where it's a little tough, especially a little tough since I'm behind the camera trying to get good, clean, close cuts on this guy. This is the equivalent of a sergeant first class today, or a gunnery sergeant if you're in the Marine Corps. Hoorah. And I'm not going to dunk that one just yet because our American flag is actually probably ready to go. Not quite yet. That's okay. And another note of caution when working with multiple decals, make sure that anything you're handling your decals with is dry, because if you get any water on it, it will start to activate. And once it dries after that, it's not going to be a usable decal, which I may have accidentally done with this. So we're going to go ahead, dip it, and get going from there. I've done that with very large sheets of wallpaper decals for Star Trek kits. So all of a sudden, large pieces of decal that I wasn't prepared to do had to get done in a hurry. That was fun. And it happened more than once. Okay, so let's go ahead and check. That looks like it's definitely ready there. Definitely ready. Okay, so again, same process as before. Solvus or microset on our shoulder, and we'll go ahead and get that slid into place. Off the paper just a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and use my finger on this, and again, I want to position it relative to the angle of the arm. So that is pretty close, but we want to kind of adjust that into place a little bit more. So one end up and over just a little bit. That looks just about perfect. We'll go ahead and lightly dab any excess off, and then hit it with just a tiny little bit of Solvaset. Perfect. Okay, so our first rank insignia is probably getting pretty close, so it's going to give us just about enough time to go ahead and get our next one, because we're going to have rank insignia on both sleeves. Again, personal choice, may or may not be 100% historically accurate, but that's okay. We're all modelers here. Artistic liberty, yay. Okay, so that one is up and good. Except upside down. So we'll go ahead and take that, dunk it for a little bit and set it aside to start working. So now we'll move back over to that original side and we're going to check our decal. Is it ready? Yes, it is. So set it down momentarily. Micro set. Get a little bit of excess off my brush there. And I am going to want to be pretty careful since I'm applying this near a decal that is still fresh. So that that Solvaset has not entirely flashed off yet. And sometimes it may take multiple applications of Solvaset to get a decal to settle down into a really tight spot. So we get our close, and then get our final positioning going. And again, I use tweezers. You could use a toothpick, you could use your fingers, you could use a tip of a hobby blade. So that is actually looking pretty good to me. So again, just a little dab. And you can see there are some folds in the uniform right where we're putting that. This is where the Solvaset comes into its own. It's what's really going to help things settle down. You get the right decals on the right kit with the right surface preparation, you would not believe how well decals will settle down into panel lines and rivets. It is a thing of absolute beauty. So our final decal here. We broke it loose. We broke it loose. Just a little dunk. There we go. Micro set. I apologize if I'm getting out of frame here. And again, same precautions as before. We are putting this on near a decal that is fresh, so we do want to take care that we don't get too close. That's part of why I use a brush to position it initially instead of my fat fingers. Especially because I have to use my left hand and I am not left-handed. So we'll get our final position going here. And come on, we're close. Close, close, close. I want that. Yeah, that's actually probably pretty good. Again, relative positioning, horseshoes and hand grenades. Get the excess off there, and then just the tiniest little bit of Solvaset. That was actually not the tiniest little bit, but that was definitely more than enough to take care of the job. I would highly recommend when you are in between sessions, not actually doing decals, definitely put the lids on these because they are very easy to knock over and you don't want to do that. Go ahead and close up my water. So here we are, decals still wet. You can see those transfers are on there. They're where we want them to be. They're not going anywhere thanks to that Solvaset. You can see a completed example here of a staff sergeant with the same decal arrangement. And you can see just how well those laid down. And thanks to the Solvaset, an additional gloss coat, and then a matte varnish, you can see just how well those decals have toned down. Well, the decals are drying on our platoon sergeant. I thought I'd take this opportunity to showcase a couple of instances again of just how good Solvaset is. So both of these, this converted Vulture and this F86H, have been decaled using Microset and Solvaset. So to take a look at this Saberhog first, if you look at the tail here, well, not perfect. You can see just how well that decal has settled into the recesses and those panel lines. You can see it as well kind of on that national insignia, definitely there on the wing, a few spots where it really settled in to those, all those panel lines. And again, if we take a look at the national insignia down here, you can see those spots where it's settled in to those panel lines, especially right there in the dark blue, and you can see again right there. That is all thanks to, again, this 1-2 punch of Microset and Solvaset. And then of course here on this Vulture gunship, this shark mouth, it was Solvaset that got it to conform around this piece here. What would normally be a heavy boltrite converted and put in the GAU 8 from an A10 kit. This is actually a brass piece that was crazy to assemble. But you can definitely see how it's conformed to the very irregular surface of that particular piece. And it's the same thing on this side as well. And this, technically, it's a conversion for an Avenger, but it's actually based off of the Vulture. So just kind of some fun things to pull off the shelf as an example of what these products can do. My lovely viewers, I hope you found that helpful and informative, and hopefully give you some ideas if you're struggling with decals, a few things that you can try to make things better. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them either in the comments, or if you want to reach out to me through any of my other contact forms or social medias. So thank you very much for watching. If you feel so inclined, please like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, folks, may your paints be thin, your brushes be pointy, and your dice be hot.